Thank you so much. I'm a member of the Worldwide Fellowship of Al-Anon and Alateen, and my name is Michele. Hi, everybody. Thanks to the committee for doing all of this. This is the coolest thing. For all of you who participate, and most especially to Monique and Tiffany and Teresa. I have to write this stuff down. I have my name written down, just in case I forget. Because, I am totally not a speaker. But my sponsor told me early on, when you do service, you do this much, and God does this much. And so when I was first asked to do this, my motive wasn't really great. I'm going to get there in a couple of minutes, I hope, because it's a pretty cool story of how this happened. But I do this, and God does this. So while you might think that I'm here for you, this is a really selfish program too, and I'm doing this for me because I get to be here with you, and I get to participate in this conference, and that's just, I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't get to do this kind of service. So thanks so much for choosing me to be here. My sponsor, my second and my fourth sponsor, who's the same person, she used to say to me, that's another story. She used to say to me all the time at meetings, take what you like, store the rest, don't leave what you need. Because a lot of time people who were delivering the message for whatever reason, I couldn't hear it from them. I didn't want to hear it from them, and so she used to say that to me all the time. Store it, because you're going to need it later on. Because everything that's said everywhere is for you. It's how God speaks to us. And my job is to show up and to participate in that. So that means I have to listen. So having said that, I'm going to do my job, which is speaking from my heart. Hence the tissue. And you guys, your job is to listen with your heart, because what comes from the heart reaches the heart. I love so much about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love their set-aside prayer. And I used to, in the moment of silence, I found out I was in such great company because I found out that Lois W. used to do this. She used to, I forget what she used to do. But anyway, whatever she used to do, what I do in the moment of silence is I invite God to speak to me and speak through me. But then I learned about the AA set-aside prayer, and now in the moment of silence I've added, help me set aside everything I think I know and be open to new ideas. And when I do that, all of a sudden, if I'm doing that in the morning during my prayer and meditation, if I'm doing it because I'm in a meeting where I work, if I'm doing it at a regular meeting, wherever I am, when I do that, that's just what I feel. I just feel relaxed. I don't have to think, I could be a better speaker than her, for sure. Those ego things. And the truth is, I want to be so good that you guys have to go have a cigarette when I'm done. That's me. And whether or not you smoke, But this is in God's hands, and I work really hard to do that. I really work hard to make little me and big him. The next thing I got to tell you guys is all the good stuff that comes out of my mouth. Thank yourselves, thank the literature, thank your sponsors. Because all I do is what you tell me to do. All I've done is receive the gifts that you have to give to me. So this is how I apply all that good stuff. This is how I apply it to my life. And a little bit about what happened. I really appreciate the alcoholics who say that they take us hostage. We each have to own our own peace. But the truth is, I think I was like, ooh, 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 pick me, pick me. When you're a little kid in grade school and you know the answer, the teacher never calls on you when you know the answer. And I'd be like, ooh, trying to be really good. I'm not getting out of my seat. She won't call on me, but pick me, pick me. And that's what I was like with the alcoholics in my life. Now, it took me several years into recovery to understand that I was raised in the family disease of alcoholism. I didn't know that because it was normal to me. The whole family was doing it. We had 2 people in our family who I could honestly say were alcoholics of what I could understand to be an alcoholic. And one, they were both on my mom's side of the family. And one was, what was his name? Uncle Harold. And Uncle Harold could never stop drinking, and the whole family would gather around about Uncle Harold, and they'd put him away in like what I now know was a rehab, but it was always like, we're putting him away. And like as a little kid, I'd be like, is he in the closet? Like, what do you, we are putting him away. And then he would come back, and everybody would be glad to see him and a little uptight, and then he would start seeing leprechauns jumping around from house to house. And what that meant was that's how they would communicate to each other, because he really was, seeing those things. But that meant that Uncle Harold was drinking again. And Uncle Harold could never stay sober, so the rehab hired him, and he went to live there. That was an alcoholic to me. My other uncle, Uncle Kenny, was like a typical Skid Row bum. Lost everything, lived under the train trestle, and just drank, and died from the disease. So to say that I was affected by alcoholism, I didn't get that the whole family dances the addicted dance. And I didn't get that my dad, who went to work every day, who brought home the paycheck, who functioned kind of, sort of, and just drank like nightly and on the weekends, I didn't get that that could also be the manifestation of alcoholism. Of course, I also didn't get that it wasn't my job to say. But I was talking to my friend Denise in recovery about this, who's a double winner. I love double winners. Like, they hit the rooms running. Or they go in our rooms and then they come back around. They come in the back door, they say, and then go into AA. She's a double winner. And I was describing my dad, and she said, you can't call him an alcoholic, but it quacks like a duck, and it flies like a duck. It's only a matter of time before he starts swimming. So I was satisfied with that. It was kind of a way that I could say, whether or not my dad's drinking affected me. And that's what we've talked about too. That's how I can identify, because it's about me, it's not about him. So who knew that I grew up in the family disease of alcoholism, and that it was going to set me up to do the ooh, 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 pick me, pick me. So I had a friend whose brother owned a bar, and she managed the bar, and she was really overworking. And she said to me, could you just like fill in on the weekends, do the bank and stuff like that? So I did, and I'd go in, and they were like these adorable bartenders in there, and they were so much fun. And I heard this one was like really good in bed. And so I wanted to find out. And I allowed him to pursue me a little bit, and I'm going to tell you now, because if I don't, I always get asked. Yes, he was. It was fun. But he was so wild that I never intended to have a relationship with him. But he was like relentlessly pursuing me. And he hates when I say this, but I really thought he was like so hard up because he just wouldn't leave me alone. So I finally started dating him, and then I decided I really didn't like him. But I kept dating him, and we went to his best friend's wedding, and I really, if I was gonna consider giving him his dream of being with me, there are a few adjustments that had to be made, and he would leave me. We would go someplace, and then he would leave me for the true love of his life. Sambuca, Bud Light, Jell-O shots, whatever was happening at the time. So we would have little chit-chats about things like that, and then it would keep happening. He'd be good for a little while, so I thought I was making some changes and some headway. But I finally decided that I needed to break up with him, but we were going to his best friend's wedding. He was in the wedding, and I didn't want to be rude and break up with them. But when we got to the wedding, I'm sitting all by myself, and they're off laughing and doing, and I want to laugh and do too. I don't know why I was being left out, but I was over here and he was over there, and so I finally, I'm done with this, and I left, and we were in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn that night on a Saturday night. It's busy, and there's people, and there's public transportation, and I went out there, and I swear to you, there was a tumbleweed going down the middle of the street. There's no tumbleweeds in Brooklyn. Just kidding. But that's what it was like. Where was everybody? Where were all the buses? Where were all the people? There was nobody there, and I couldn't get away. So I was like, oh, fine, I'll go back inside. I'll wait this out. So I go back inside, and he's at the bar, and he calls me over, and he says, I want you to meet my mom. whoa, this is serious. So I went over, and he introduced me to his mom, and he said, Mom, this is my girlfriend, Michele, and isn't she pretty? And his mother said, oh, yeah, Kenny, they're all pretty. So I said, I'll show you, I'll marry him. And I did. I had a wonderful, I was laughing this morning, we were talking a little bit about control earlier, and I was thinking about my 29 points to make a decision today, and at the end I kind of guessed and try to do what is God's will. But back then it was like, really? I'll marry him, show you, So we got married, and here's the truth. I can't give credit to everybody that I've ever learned something from, because we'd be here like for 3 days. Other speakers and literature and my sponsors and whatever. But there was one person who put it close to this, and what he said was true for me. Kenny and I met, our diseases met, and our diseases dated, and our diseases got married. And before you knew it, we had 4 little diseases running around the house. And we were constantly in somebody's office with me complaining about him, and he, and I don't really remember a whole lot of what people were telling us to do, but I knew that as soon as they suggested that it was something I needed to do, that it was like, absolutely not, because I am not the problem. He's the problem. And if we're not going to focus over there, we're done here. But I complained so much to my best friend, and my best friend, both of her parents were in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't know how much of a clue she had about Al-Anon, or if she was like telling her parents how much I was complaining about him. I'm not sure to this day. But she was so tired of hearing me complain about Kenny, she said, I'm not going to talk to you about Kenny anymore until you go to Al-Anon. So I went to my first meeting in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. It was a large rectangular table full of people. And I felt humiliated and embarrassed to need to be going into a room like that with those people, because I was newly married and very pregnant. And I walked in, and it was the underground, it was downstairs, and I walked in, and just like my skin was crawling. I was just so humiliated to have to be there. And my condition and my age. It was 1982. I was 23 years old, I think. And I sat amongst all these women who kind of look like I do today, almost everybody. And there was a guy talking who was kind of pasty-skinned. I figured he was an alcoholic. And he kind of looked like one of my uncles. That's what I thought. And he was like probably the only guy in the room. But there was something going on, and they were speaking English, even though they have those horrible Brooklyn accents, sorry. They were speaking English, but they were putting the words together in this really weird way, this dialect that I didn't quite understand, and it's the language of recovery. It's a dialect. It takes a little while to get to know that, and I don't know this. I just know that they're, blah, 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 ha, 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 blah, blah, blah. They're like laughing and smiling and listening and sharing and everything, and it came time for the people around the room to share, and they went around, which to this day I really don't care for. But they went around the room, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I could feel the puddle of sweat forming underneath my fingers. And I heard somebody say, I'll pass. And I was like, oh, that's an option, great. And all I could think of after that was, say you pass, say you pass, say you pass, say you pass. And it got to me, and I went, I pass, and they went around. And they were done, and I don't know what it was. I don't remember what I heard. I don't remember anybody at that meeting. But again, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And I didn't realize that even in all of my disease, they were speaking the language of the heart. And there was something inside me that was understanding that I was in the right place at the right time. And by the end of the meeting, I knew I was home. I knew I was with my people. And we all stood up and held hands and said the Lord's Prayer. And then I sheepishly turned to the person to my left who was talking to the person to her left. And I looked down and around, and I looked over here, and this person was facing that way and talking to them. And I looked around the room, and everybody was talking to somebody, and nobody was looking at me or talking to me. And I waited a few seconds, and then I started to step away from the table because nobody was noticing me, and I started to back up toward those stairs. And the closer I got to the stairs, the more my heart got hard and closed. Nobody noticed me. Nobody greeted me. Nobody welcomed me. By the time I got to the stairs, I was saying, "Don't you dare look at me. Don't you talk to me now, because I'm done." And that was one of my pre-Al-Anon skills. You hurt me, I'll kill you. And the brick wall went up, and I got to the stairs, and I walked up the stairs, and I went unnoticed. And I backed out of those rooms and gave my life to the family disease of alcoholism for another 6 years as a result. If you're new, I'm at you like a hornet. I went into that room. I left that room looking for an excuse not to come back. I don't know if I went there looking for an excuse not to come back, but I didn't have to look far to find it. I went unnoticed. If you don't want to come back, if you choose not to come back yet, if you want to go back out and give yourself to the family disease, that's fine. But the reason isn't going to be because you go unnoticed, because I'm going to notice you. And ever since then, I've never noticed anybody go unnoticed. And I watch. It's not always me, but somebody goes after somebody. And it's one of the things I love about the greeters in Alcoholics Anonymous. You can't escape. They're at the door. I love that. And one of our groups we've been looking at, from World Service to the state to the districts, we've been looking at, like, how do we encourage newcomers? How do we keep them coming back? And one of our groups has started the greeting position. It's not my home group, but when I go there, I walk out of the car, and there's Audrey smiling at the door. And I know I'm going to get a hug and a hello before I even go in. It's just such a warm, beautiful thing to do. So anyway, we make the geographic cure. And I think it was this morning, my husband was reading from one of our other daily readers that said, when an ass goes traveling, it doesn't come back a horse. So we moved our little donkey asses to Dingmans, Ferry, Pennsylvania, and we're going to start again. And the interesting thing was, we all moved up there, you know, us and these 4 little diseases moved from Brooklyn, and then my husband was still working in Brooklyn. So he tucked me up in the mountains, and I mean, it's 45 minutes one way to go to the supermarket. We're tucked up in the mountains, and he's commuting back to New York every day, and he's drinking, and he's bartending, and he's staying down there all week. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with this picture? He was incredibly brilliant because he got that removed. So I'm up there being like this single parent now. So as soon as I can, you know, we do what we always do. We join the churches and the local community things, you know, because we look just fine on the outside. Thank you. Everything, you know, we're a train wreck in here, but boy, oh boy, we look good out there. And I'm in the parish priest office telling him the exact nature of my husband's wrongs. And he's, you know, he's nodding and he's listening and he's asking, you know, Kenny, is she right? Kenny, is this true? And blah, 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 blah. I'm having this little discussion. And finally, I'm getting somebody who's really listening to my side of the story. And the parish priest says to my husband, you need to go to AA. Now, you know, back in the day, I would have been like, at one point, Kenny came home to me and said, I think I'm an alcoholic. And I said, don't be ridiculous. You know, you're young and you're handsome and you're virile and you're fun and you have a job and kind of sort of, and you kind of sort of bring the money home. You're not like Uncle Kenny and Uncle Harold. You're not an alcoholic, you know. So at this point, when the parish priest said, you know, you're an alcoholic, you need to go to AA, I was like, I don't care what you call him or what, just do something with him because he's my problem. And then he turned to me and he said, and you need to go to Al-Anon. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Absolutely not. There is nothing wrong with this. It's all that. And he said, you're enabling him. And I said, I am not enabling him. I am doing everything I can to make him stop and behave himself. And he said, you need to go to Al-Anon. There's a meeting right here in our parish on Saturday night. And he said the magic words, you'll be surprised who you see there. So I went to my first meeting because my best friend wouldn't talk to me unless I did, and I went to my second meeting because I was nosy and I wanted to see who else in the parish needed to be there. So I walked in, and this time I didn't go unnoticed. But I'll tell you, I was like absolutely flippin' precious. I had the hat and the coat and the suit and the nails and the shoes, and like just in case anybody thought it might be me, I wanted you to know that I was perfect. Somebody else, and I'll tell you the story. Just give me a second to take a breath. So I go in, and they do this, their little greeting, and they say, we suggest you try 6 meetings, or we'll gladly refund your misery. We were all laughing because that's so funny. But inside, I was like, how'd they know that I was miserable? Look at me, I'm perfect. And I used to say, because none of us come skipping with glee into Al-Anon saying, yippee, I qualify. And then I became an Alateen sponsor. This much service, this much gift. Because, I'm going to go in and help these kids. And I go in, and these kids are amazing. So I can't say anymore that there's nobody who says, yippee, I qualify, because the kids do. Because the kids are young enough to be like, oh my God, I'm not alone, yippee. And then they open up, and it all comes out. Because they don't know that you got to keep it bottled up yet. They don't know that you're only as safe as your secrets, which is what I learned in my family of origin. They think you're only as sick as your secrets. They've got more recovery coming in brand new than I had my first few years in Al-Anon, because they're still not, they're still fresh. They're still new. They're still young. They're not as damaged as I was just a few years later coming in. So there I am in my first meeting, 6 years after the first. Not recommended that there be 6 years between your first and second meeting. And so I go in, and I'm sitting there, and they're speaking that weird dialect again, but they were very attentive to me, and it was a, God bless you, it was a step tradition meeting, and they didn't alter their program because I was brand new. They did a little welcome, and they told me to keep coming back, and they smiled, and they listened a little bit to what I had to say, and then they politely kind of got me quiet, and they went into their tradition of the night, which, you want to talk about a different language, holy cow. I didn't understand much of what was going on, but they noticed me, and they welcomed me, and they wanted me to come back, and they gave me a hug. I found out years later that one of the women who was at that second meeting was at that first meeting in Brooklyn. She summered in the Poconos, and that was her summer meeting. She was there. What a coincidence that was. I came this close to asking her to sponsor me, but I was led someplace else. But it was kind of a neat connection there. So here I am in this program of recovery, and it took me a while to get somebody to sponsor me. I tried around for size. I started making little phone calls for the practical reasons. I needed somebody who it wasn't a long distance call because we didn't have a lot of money, and I needed somebody who I could identify with, who had kind of the same schedule as me. I called her and we chit-chatted, and it was kind of working. So I remember I called her up, and I had to get it out real fast. I felt like I was asking somebody to marry me. Hi Donna, it's Michele, will you be my sponsor? Before I chickened out, And she said, sure. And we started our journey through the steps. And after I was in recovery about a year and a half, she left. She left recovery. But, I learned to hang on and get dragged sometimes when I needed to. Just because she left recovery, I wasn't letting go of her. And it was like and she didn't make me let go of her, but it was a really critical time in my life, because what happened was I started to speak your language, I started to do the work, and I started to have the awakenings, I started to have the results of the work. And an essential skill for me in the family disease of alcoholism was denial. Absolutely essential, because I didn't have the tools to deal with reality. I had to deny the reality of what was going on. And one piece of our literature talks about the veil lifting, and we can perceive reality and recognize truth. And I started to have enough recovery that the veil started to lift. And one day my husband came home from work, and our oldest daughter, who was about 8 years old at the time, She was doing her math homework and she was struggling, and he was sitting in his recliner and he was calling her over. And she started to cry because she was afraid of her dad, and she should be afraid of her dad. He was like just this side of child abuse, but scary and loud and big. And he was calling her over, and she started to kind of, and that drove him crazy. But he said, like, I'm the dad, and I called you over, and you're coming over, and get over here now. And as she got closer and closer, she was working in a workbook, and he grabbed the workbook out of her hand, rolled it up like a newspaper, and smacked her in the stomach, and she fell. It wasn't out of pain, it was out of fear that she fell. And I was standing in the kitchen, and I'm watching this unfold right here, and I'm looking at it, and the veil lifted. And I perceived a reality and recognized a truth that I couldn't have done without you. I could not look at that without your support. I couldn't look at that without your tools. I couldn't look at that without the gifts you were giving me. And I saw it for the first time, and I recognized it for exactly what it was. And all along, I had been singing the song of a victim. I can't take it. I can't take it. I can't take it. If he would just change, he has to change. I've got to do something. I don't know what to do. I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. I can't take it anymore. But that didn't empower me at all. It just kept me where I was and whiny. And in that moment, something came over me, a strength from beyond me, a strength from here. And my can't changed to a very determined, very, it was about me. I won't do this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. And I turned off the stove and I said very quietly, we're leaving. So much of what I was doing before that moment was about getting him to listen, getting him to engage, getting him to come home, getting him to give me the money, manipulation, and blah, 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 blah. None of it's working. And in that moment, it didn't matter. It wasn't about him. We're not doing this anymore. And I said to the kids, we're leaving. And I started to walk toward the door. And I remember we had a toy chest in the center of the living room, and I remember splinters of wood flying. I don't remember a whole lot else, but evidently there was a reaction to my saying we're leaving. And as I got closer to the door, as I opened the door, the first one out was the dog. Smartest one in the whole group. Because the family disease of alcoholism just doesn't affect us. It affects the entire family. So we started in a little Alapup. We have 2 animals now. They're both in recovery. Stanley goes to Al-Anon. He's a 5-pound long-haired Chihuahua. Ollie is a 25-pound Maine Coon cat. He's a straight AA. Doesn't want to have anything to do with Al-Anon. And one of my speaker friends talked about how we call Stanley the tiny dancer. When we come home, he does this cute little thing where he does this, and then you go to pick him up and his paws go like this. He's just so cute. And my cat is like, oh yeah, the can opener's here. It's exactly what it's like. So anyway, we didn't have Stanley at the time. This is a long time ago. So the dog's the first one out. I grab the cat. The kids get in the car. We all get in the car, and for the first time I realized I've got a typical family disease car. Please start, please start, please start. Please start, please start, please start. The exhaust system is duct taped up. I have these standards of living. I come from this family. I had money when I got married. But all of these things are starting to crumble away under the weight of the family disease of alcoholism, and I don't even notice they're happening. Because it's insidious, and it's powerful, and it's baffling, and it's sneaky, and it's like this black smoke that just infiltrated everything about our lives. Get the car to start, and I drive to the local ambulance corps, which is about 5 miles away, because they had a payphone. You might have to ask your sponsor what that is. There were no cell phones back then, but they had a payphone, and I had mad money. My best friend taught me I always have mad money. I didn't even know, I thought the money was mad. I didn't know what she was talking about, but it's like emergency money in case you get mad at him, which was 25 times a day. So I call my sponsor, who's no longer in recovery, and I tell her exactly what was going on. And she said, we're having a birthday party for my son. Come on over. So I drive over, and sponsorship is like relationship 101 for me. It's about boundaries, and it's about love and unconditional love and sharing and heart-to-heart stuff, but in no uncertain terms. Like, she didn't really even have to say anything. Like, this is about my son. We're having a birthday party, So I drive over there. We have absolutely nothing. I grab my purse, the kids, the dog, the cat. I had to leave the rabbits. And we get there, and, we open the door, and the disease just comes, like, spilling out of the car. And she opens the front door, come on in, we're having cake. Like, this is so bizarre, I just leave this violent situation, and we're going to go in and have cake. The kids are all about it. So the dog gets out and runs into the woods and gets skunked. The cat got scared, went up inside the engine of my car, and her husband's solution was just turn the motor on, he'll come out. Fortunately, I knew better. No, we'll just leave him there for a little while, he'll be fine. And our son had a trach in place, it started to bleed, and our youngest daughter had a seizure. She had a seizure disorder. It's like all hell's breaking loose. Come on in, we'll have cake. Oh, okay. And we went in, and the kids, they go off with the other kids, and they're doing their kid thing, and I'm kind of sitting there a little uptight. But, she saw this coming. She saw this coming before I started to see this coming. And she started to make suggestions to me like, did you ever look into getting an order of protection from abuse? Did you ever talk to a lawyer? Do you know what this process looks like? Do you know where to get, like, food stamps and welfare and blah, 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 blah? Just do that. Like, she would give me these homework assignments, and I would do them. Like, oh, fine. She's my sponsor, I salute. So I was doing all of that. So I had these things in place. I had even talked to a lawyer who told me what it was going to look like if I ever needed a protection from abuse. Okay, like maybe she wants me to go to law school or something. I don't know why I have to do this. So I knew what it looked like. I knew what the phone calls. I knew I had the phone numbers. I knew what to do. And she sat with me that night, and we made some phone calls that night. And I got an order of protection from abuse on behalf of my daughter. And then what happened was, you guys did what you guys do. And that meant the hotline was going on behind in the background. Now, there was a hotline in my family of origin. My mother was like the telephone operator, boop, 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 of the family. It always came in under like the guise of, we have a prayer request, and that's how they spread the gossip in the family. And it would always go through my mom. But in Al-Anon, it was different. It was like, she finally did it. We need somebody to take her and the kids, and who's going to take the dog and the cat, and what about the rabbits, and can we rescue them? And this is all going on behind the scenes with all of you guys. And what I did was, with me and my 4 kids, we just went from Al-Anon house to Al-Anon house to Al-Anon house, and who's picking up the kids, and who's dropping them off at the bus stop, and who's going to feed them tonight. And we did that for 2 weeks, because that's who you are. And that's what you do, because you're my family. So we did that for a couple of weeks, and then we had to go to court. And I took this little girl with me, this beautiful little girl, and I can remember practicing the principles that you taught me while we were in the courtroom. And I'm pointing out the architecture to her, and you close your eyes and just breathe in the clean smell of the courthouse, and just trying to stay in the moment while we wait for him to come in and see what's going to happen next. And our lawyer met with us, and she told us what was going to happen. And what wound up happening was we had already drawn up an agreement that if he agreed to go to AA, he could come home. And if he wasn't going to agree to get sober, I was going to file for divorce. Nobody knew about the divorce piece, not even my lawyer. I knew. I wasn't going to live that way anymore. I'm not doing it. And the reason that we drew up the agreement that if he went into AA, he could come home was because it was essential that we had hope in our house. He couldn't come home without me having hope that there was going to be change. None of us needs to change just because we're in the room. I know people who don't work the steps. I know people who just stop drinking in Alcoholics Anonymous. I know people who coast in Al-Anon. It's just good enough. There's like this ocean, and they come with a teaspoon. And I knew that might not be what it was going to take to save our marriage. But I knew that there had to be hope in order for there to be hope. So that's what we did. And my sponsor had said things to me like, marriages and disease are not always meant to survive recovery, once he got in recovery. And that's when the claws came out. Mine, 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 mine. Because I did love him. And we had this beautiful little family together. And I really, really wanted it to work. But I was powerless over that too. I could work my program of recovery, and we started an Alateen group, and the kids started going to Alateen. And that was the best that I could do. That's all I'm supposed to do. His recovery, how he worked his program was up to him. So in the meantime, my sponsor, of course, had me continue to bring the focus back on myself. But I digress. Sorry. So my lawyer presents this agreement, and my husband, as part of his story, will tell you that the night before he sat in his cousin's house just a few blocks away. I had no idea where he was. He had been removed from the house. We were put back in the house. And I was deeply sad, but I was deeply peaceful. And that was appropriate. You gave me the gift of grief. You gave me the gift of feeling the vastness of my emotions, but not being enslaved to them. So I could feel it, and I knew, this is really awful, and this is horrible, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that I'm in God's will. I know I'm doing the next right thing. Life by the yard is hard. Life by the inch is a cinch. All I have to do is the next right thing. And in that courtroom, it wasn't like a day at a time. It wasn't even a minute at a time. It was like a breath at a time. So he stood before the judge, and he'll tell you that night before he had a Tanqueray and tonic in one hand, and he had a Pinewood Derby car from the Boy Scouts that he was working on with our son in the other hand, and he was weighing them, and he was looking from, which one am I going to choose? Which one am I going to choose? And one of our friends in Alcoholics Anonymous said, I traded everything I ever loved for alcohol. And that's what Kenny was looking at that night. Am I going to trade everything I ever loved because this disease is going to take me? What's my choice going to be? And he didn't know what he was going to choose till he stood before the judge and the words came out of his mouth. And the judge said, you can go home if you do a 90 and 90. And Kenny said, I'll do a 90 and 90. And then the judge looked at me and he said, and I'm going to hold you in contempt of court if he doesn't. And I went, all year and a half of recovery came, whoop. Yeah, but you don't know. And my lawyer was like, don't say anything. The agreement got signed, and we all went out, and the three of us got in that car, that please start car. And we had to drive a half an hour to Dingmans freaking Ferry. With someone start raging, not drinking in the front seat with me, because of course I had to drive. I always drove. Danny's in the back seat, and we're driving, and I'm flooring it. I made it home in 20 minutes, a record to this day. And I ran in the house, couldn't wait to get to the phone. When I first started and you guys gave me a phone list, I could not believe that you really wanted me to do that. You are going to be available to me, for nothing, for free, 24/7. It was like the 2 million pound handle, And once I learned how to use it, it was just a lifeline to, I throw up, you give me wisdom, I get better when I do what you tell me to do. And I learned to use it. So I couldn't wait to get to that phone, run to the phone, dial my sponsor. And she said, left, right, breathe. Left, right, breathe. You don't have to make the call just for today. Don't worry about making it. Because I'm I know what's going to happen, because here I go. I'm an expert. I'm there in 2 hot seconds. I know what's going to happen. He's going to not go. I'm going to be held in contempt of court. They're going to put me in jail. He's going to be forced into recovery from watching those 4 children, and he's going to meet some girl in AA, and she's going to have my life, and I'm going to be in jail. And my sponsor was like, shut up. Shut up. Stop thinking. Stop thinking. I still, to this day, I think shut up should be a slogan. So I never had to make that phone call. I forget, I think it's a good thing that I don't remember. I think he celebrated 29 years this past March in Alcoholics Anonymous. So here we are. Now we're kind of like on the same page, and my sponsor's got me focused on me, and he's over there doing whatever he's doing. I'm like, trying not to pay attention to how he's working his program of recovery, at least not after that 90 days. And I had this list of what was going to change when he stopped drinking, and it was a really wonderful list. It was something that I did before recovery, and it was useful to me in recovery. These are the exact nature of his wrongs, his defects of character, and when the alcohol is removed, all of this stuff is going to go away. And this list is going to stay, because this is the good stuff. And, the defects of character didn't go away right away. The amends that I wanted didn't come. At least not like face-to-face, although he swears that he did it. And I keep saying to him, no, but you can do it now. I think we had that conversation last week. It's kind of a running joke for us. But anyway, I don't remember where I was. So the focus is on me. So I'm still on the phone as the whining victim because I don't have that much recovery yet. And I was complaining one day about having 4 kids in 5 years. And I loved it when my sponsor validates, that's a lot of kids in a short period of time. And, you're outnumbered. Mm-hmm. And you're understaffed. Mm-hmm. And what do you think caused that? I gotta go. What a horrible thing to say. So we figured out what caused that and stopped doing it. Because the disease of alcoholism affects every area of my life. Every dark corner, every closed door, every closet that I don't open to recovery stays sick and in the shadows of the disease. And I had to start to look at that. And one time, my husband loved to sit like right in the center, right looking up at me while I was speaking. And I was telling that story one time, and I said, at one point, my husband thought that I gave up sex for Lent, and he yelled up from the audience, Lent? I thought it was your New Year's resolution. So I got to do an inventory on my sex life, and when it came time for me to do my 5th step, I said to my sponsor, I really want to do my 5th step on this with Kenny, and she said, oh, thank God. So I did, and it was like this amazing healing thing, because he had no idea of some deep, dark secrets that were affecting my sex life, and I got to talk to him about that, and we had this amazing, gentle exchange. I learned so many relationship skills from you guys. I learned how to sit with Kenny. First, I did the work with my sponsor about like deal breaker stuff. Like, this is big. This is a big deal, and I want a divorce. Every other day, I want a divorce. I want a divorce. All right, let's sleep on that. Let's talk about it. But I learned like the really big deal breakers, and I learned to sit with my husband knee to knee, hand to hand, eye to eye, heart to heart. And it wasn't about him. It was about, for instance, we had to have that conversation about finances. Because my husband is like very spontaneous and very fun. And, like I like the knight in shining armor image, and I like Prince Charming, and I kind of married Peter Pan when it came to money. So we had to have a chit-chat. And it was a deal breaker for me because I wasn't willing to live on the brink of financial disaster anymore. So we had that conversation. And he had to take a few days to figure out whether or not he wanted to live with a budget and a plan. I was kind of surprised. And he came back to me and he said, yes, I'm willing to do that. And we worked it out, what it looked like. And it was interesting to see the pattern. He would stop drinking because I would like do something awful to get his attention, and he'd stop drinking, and it was like always 2.5, 3 weeks, and then it would start again. 2.5, 3 weeks into this financial plan, it just kind of started to and I had to sit with him again. And I said to him, you have every right to live any way you want to live, and so do I, and I'm not willing to live on the brink of financial disaster. And I need it for us to have this budget and have this plan and have this security. And this is what that looks like. And he said, okay. And we lived that way ever since, with the budget and the plan and the life insurance. And I give a little and he gives a little, because I'm like a total squirrel, and I would like amass, prudent reserve, just like this big, gigantic vault of money around me to make me feel secure. And I gave up on that, and I trust my higher power, and I trust him. In fact, I'm away, and he's got the MAC card. How's that for recovery? We learn to trust each other, and trust comes from trust. It comes from dignity. It comes from not managing and mothering him. It comes from intimate, authentic conversations. It comes from the work that we both do behind the scenes and bring to our marriage. So here we are, we're both working these programs of recovery, and we're both growing toward our higher power, and you can't help but grow together when you're going toward that common goal. You know, before I was going toward him not drinking, and he was going toward drinking, and we were never going to come together. We couldn't come together as a couple, and I want to tell you my hope story real quick. This happened to a friend of mine, and then it happened to me, and I was so glad it happened to me because now I get to say it. So I answered the phone one day, and it was the wrong number, and this woman said, "Hi, is there hope there? Is hope there?" And I said, "No, there's no hope here." And then I burst out laughing because there's hope all over my house. There's hope all over my life. You are giving me life skills. Like, I got there, and if you could have articulated it, forget everything you ever knew. We're going to totally rebuild you in a different way that makes you free. And we're not going to tell you what you're supposed to look like. We're going to give you the tools to do it, and we're going to help you build you. That's what happened. That's what you gave me. That's who I am today. What I discovered in my fourth step was like a scratch-off lottery ticket, and you guys and the steps, the traditions, the concepts, service, everything that you have to offer to me is like the shiny penny. And the family disease of alcoholism layered on that scratch-off lottery ticket until who God originally intended me to be was so obscured you couldn't see it at all. And we together scratched off. And here she is. This woman of quiet dignity and unassuming grace. Who knew? Who knew that I was courageous? Who knew who I really was? I think that's what we recover in recovery, who God intended us to be. I was amazed. I came in because I was nosy. I came in because she wouldn't talk to me. And I expected really for you guys to give me the recipe to make him stop drinking so I could go home, cook it up, and pour it down his freaking throat so I would be okay. And instead what you did was you gave me me. I don't know who else can do something like that other than you fine people. And then over in Alcoholics Anonymous, they're doing the same thing for my husband. So here we are growing together. And we started to do recovery things together a little bit, and the Al-Anon convention, the state convention used to be in Gettysburg, and I never liked to go because it was always on Father's Day weekend, and I just thought that's so disrespectful to have an Al-Anon convention on Father's Day weekend. And then the kids got a little bit older, and our oldest daughter was in college, and I asked her to come home and watch the kids so that her dad and I could go to this convention together. So we go to the convention together, and I'm so excited, and this is how it works. I'm telling him all about it. It's his first convention ever, and you know, on Friday night they have this AA speaker, and then on Saturday they have a couple speak Saturday night, and they have these workshops all day, and the spiritual speaker on Sunday morning. So we get there, and we check into our dorm, and we push the beds together, and we make it like one big bed, and like they're college dorm beds, like there's only so much. We wound up sleeping together on one of those skinny little beds. You push them together, and you just wind up on the floor. Got a little too old for that. So we go to the Friday night speaker meeting, and it's not a speaker meeting. They have somebody from the Stepping Stones there doing a slideshow historical presentation. Nobody asked me. I wasn't on the committee, but nobody asked me, and I was not happy. I'm like, I can't believe, and he's like not into it either. So we're sitting there, and I'm so disappointed. But God can speak to me anywhere, anytime, through anybody, so I'm going to listen. So we're sitting there, and the presenter's doing this slideshow, and here are Bill and Lois in front of Stepping Stones. Aren't they sweet? And here are Bill and Lois on the motorcycle together. Aren't they sweet? And here are Bill and Lois by his desk at wit's end. Aren't they sweet? And I'm like, oh my God, I got it. I got the message. God is speaking to me. I couldn't wait till the meeting was over so I could tell him that I received this message that he's supposed to be sweet to me. So the meeting's over, and I'm like sitting there, I'm all excited and everything, and I explained the whole thing to him, and he's like, okay, what message did you get? And I said, you're supposed to be sweet to me. And he was like, I was devastated. I was appalled. God's message, and he gave me the finger. So I run out to the payphones, because I'm going to report his behavior, and I dial my sponsor, and I blah, 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 blah. Okay, would you believe this? And I get all done. And my sponsor today is from the South, and I've learned that when she says things like, oh, bless your heart, it's like, I'm in such trouble. You know where I come from? Are you freaking kidding me? What's flipping wrong with you? And I saved you from those F words, because that's not the words to use where I come from. So, oh, bless your heart. Honey, the message was for you, not for him. You're supposed to be sweet to him. So I saluted her. I was so mad. She couldn't see me, so I got away with it. I hang up the phone, and I'm mad, and I'm like, okay, breathe, breathe, breathe. Receive the message. You're supposed to be sweet. I think it's Courage to Change that says we have to become what we want to attract. So I've got to bring to my marriage what I want in my marriage. Fine. I really think he's supposed to be sweet first, but fine. So I run, we're several blocks away from the dorms where we're staying. I run after him, I catch up to him, and I start being sweet to him. And he's instantaneously sweet back to me. We used to have these awful, horrible, drop down, drag out fights probably 12 times a day. There's no sweet in our marriage. And now I'm sweet to him, and he's instantaneously sweet to me. By the time we walked back to the dorm, I needed a nap. That sweet stuff really takes it out of you. And that's what I find, in step 7, my job's done. It's God's job to do the removing of the defective character. I walk in cooperation with that, but I'm done. It's God's job. But walking in cooperation can be really tiring. So when I find that, I get excited today when I find a new defective character, yay, there's something else to be removed here. I'm going to be better. I'm going to be even more free. I'm going to be even more joyous. Yay, look, I discovered a new one. This is great. That's not what it was like in the beginning at all, but it's gotten there. And so we took a nap when we got back because we were so tired. But it was one of those times in our life that was absolutely life-changing for us, where we're going this way, and all of a sudden we're going this way. And we, with both of us working our programs of recovery, we discovered this secret that life and marriage is supposed to be heaven on earth. Who knew? It wasn't what I saw growing up. It wasn't what I was experiencing in my marriage with my husband. It's a gift that you gave me because I wanted to make him stop drinking. You helped me discover that marriage is heaven on earth. And that's what we came to live together. We got to a point in our marriage where we couldn't remember the last time we were even a little upset with each other. It was a miraculous transformation. Our youngest daughter got into a relationship with a guy that everybody was really, really concerned about. And Kenny and I weren't concerned. Our kids saw active addiction on both of our parts. They saw active recovery on both of our parts. They saw the healing that can come as a result of these rooms. And we knew that we had set a standard for living for them to aspire to. And we knew that when she got into this relationship that wasn't very good, that we needed to give her the dignity to figure that out on her own. And she came to me one day and she said, I'm breaking up with him. And she said, I'm breaking up with him because it's not good enough. It's not like you and Dad. Complete and utter transformation. So we're experiencing this amazing life together and all of these gifts and growth all over the place. And I had an amazing experience when our youngest daughter, when she was born. There were some strange circumstances around her death, around her birth, and we wound up almost losing her. And she had a seizure disorder, and she was under control, and then she wasn't. And it was just this mess. And she was very, very bright and very smart, and she started to deteriorate intellectually. She wound up having a brain tumor that nobody knew about from when she was born until she was 4 years old. And they went in to do epilepsy surgery, and they found this tumor, and they removed it. And again, hope came into our house at that point, because this baby was just a train wreck. But at one point, when Kenny was still working long distance, we're both in recovery, we're working on ourselves and our marriage, and I was alone with the kids. And a lot of us in Dingmans, Ferry, our husbands would work long distance, and we'd have this heavy snow, and we'd be snowed in, and we'd all kind of hunker down together. And I was with another recovering mom. And at one point, Timmy had his trach in place. Amanda was breaking through with seizures. We didn't know what was going on. And the kids, they knew not to yell if there was an emergency. And they would kind of sing-song, "Mommy, Amanda's having a seizure." And, Timmy's trach is bleeding, and I would need to take care of it. And one of the scary things was living so rurally, if she went into a status seizure, etc. But there was one night in particular, I was staying over her house with all of the kids, and she had this breakthrough seizure, and I was just depleted. I was just overwhelmed, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I fell across the bed, and I felt absolutely despondent. And I laid across the bed, and I had this miraculous experience. And what it was I heard a voice. It wasn't male or female. It wasn't audible, but I heard it in my body. And the voice said, "Amanda will be all right." And when the voice said that, I felt the despondency lift. It left my body, starting at my toes, and it worked its way all the way up to my head. And I knew that I had heard the voice of God. And I had the unmitigated gall to say, "What do you mean, all right?" "Do you mean like all right seizure-free? Do you mean all right dead? Do you mean all right normal? What are we talking about?" And I felt the despondency creep over my body again, and it went all the way down to my toes. And I went, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And the voice again said, "Amanda will be all right." And it lifted. And I laid there in this spiritual experience. And I felt peace. I don't know what all right looks like, but I knew Amanda was going to be all right. Amanda wound up being they told us that she was severely and profoundly retarded, and there was nothing they could do. And what was happening behind the scenes was this tumor was growing in her brain. And I couldn't accept it. And the people in early intervention that I worked with in Milford said, "What's it going to take for you to believe this?" Because they didn't believe that she was so bright. They'd never met her before. And I said, "I want to hear it from our original neurologist in Brooklyn." And they said, "Well, why don't you do that?" It was almost like a snarky, like, "You don't believe us, why don't you go do that?" So I did. And when he saw her, he cried, and he took her down, and he found that there's like this one little spot where the seizure was originating, and they did the surgery, and they found the tumor. And at first, Amanda needed a lot of therapy and a lot more intervention, and it was a lot of work. But I didn't know what it looked like, but I knew Amanda was going to be all right. And we worked with her, and all the kids swam. And Amanda, being the youngest, didn't know, like, she wasn't like everybody else. So the kids were, like, doing these beautiful dives and these strokes, and she'd jump in like this little frog. She's 10 years old, and she's still, like, belly flopping in the water and swimming away, and yay me. And, we just kept doing, we just kept doing the next right thing. And Amanda wound up totally qualifying for the varsity swim team, like a bona fide member. She played the flute like her sister did, and wound up in the symphony orchestra at East Stroudsburg University. Amanda got a job as a cashier in Walmart and bought a used Mercedes. And they told us with a brain injury, like, you can't predict where she's going to stop getting better. And she just kept getting better and better and more amazing. And she's married and she owns a beautiful home. She's got a great husband. She has a Jeep now instead of the Mercedes. And she's one of the most all-rightest people I know. Like, I can't limit God with my imagination. You keep giving me the skills to walk through lifey life. Our third son came down with a very rare neuromuscular disease when he was 3 years old, Guillain-Barré syndrome. And Guillain-Barré paralyzes the peripheral nerve coverings of the body. It starts at the feet, works its way up, and it paralyzes everything, and including, for him, it paralyzes his heart and his lungs, which are muscles. It went up half the side of his face. He could only cry out of one side. He could only have tears out of one side, and that's what Guillain-Barré does. And then when it's ready, it reverses, and you need totally to be rehabilitated. You don't die from Guillain-Barré, but you die from things like pneumonia, etc. And after 7 days, they trach you, and on the 7th day, they extubated him. He didn't need a trach, and they rehabilitated him. And he was in the hospital the whole summer that he was 3 years old. And is it odd or is it God? Is it coincidence? Is it God incidence? I don't know. But I would rather believe and be wrong than not believe and be wrong. Because believing in a power greater than myself, there's evidence all around me that there is a power greater than myself. You're evidence of that. My life is evidence of that. My children are evidence of that. So TJ is getting better and better. He developed a scar tissue, and they had to do a trach a year later. And he was laying with his head in my lap, and we had a quiet moment in the house one day. And he said to me, Mommy, when I died, you remember when I died? And we never talked about that. They tell you to take pictures of people in the hospital, and we had done that. We took pictures of him in the wheelchair strapped in when he couldn't move, and in the walker when he was being rehabilitated. And he never wanted to talk about it or look at any of the pictures. So it was really odd when he brought that up one day in this rare moment that we were alone. And he said, do you remember when I died? And I said, yeah, buddy. And he said, Mama, when I died, I saw God. And I said, no, really? And he said, yeah. And God was all white and all light, just like you, Mama. And that was another changing moment for me, because I was really having trouble with step 3 at that point. And I thought, if he perceives God like all light and all love, just like you, Mama, I can trust that. I can trust that kind of higher power. Another thing that really helped me with step 3 was my sponsor at the time and one of our biker friends, who was a double winner, cooked this up. He came and picked me up and got me on the back of his Harley, and he said, you're going to learn step 3, get on the bike. And while we were going out of the parking lot of the church meeting, he said, you're either going to love this or you're going to hate it. And by the time I got to the end of the driveway, I was going, whee, this is great. And I got to feel what it feels like to trust, to put my life in someone else's hands, who earned that trust. Here's God working in my life, in all of your lives, and you're telling me your stories, and I'm receiving these stories, and I'm having these events happen, and I'm starting to recognize that there's a power out there, who my sponsor says is not a deranged game show host. He's not a terrorist. This is a God of love and light and understanding, and a God who, when I was on the floor next to my husband, and he was in bed, and I had a 2-year-old and a newborn, and I'm hysterical crying, and the 2-year-old's patting my back because Dad's in bed drunk again. The answer to those prayers was, I've got Al-Anon for you. Not the answer I was looking for, not the answer I thought I wanted, but something above and beyond my wildest dreams awaited me here. A set of skills to handle whatever life gives me, and a family to hold me while I do it. My friend Robbie used to say, we have good days and then we have days we grow. And in 2011, I had a growing year because that man of my dreams, that man that I loved, the man who was giving me heaven on earth, started to have these strange symptoms. They were like heart attack or stroke symptoms, and we had one of those chit-chats, knee to knee, hand to hand, eye to eye, heart to heart. I'm not going to leave you over this, but this is really important to me, and I don't want you to die. You're the love of my life. Please go to the doctor. And he said, okay. And he had been on a 12-step call when he had these strange symptoms, and he didn't go to the doctor. And 24 hours later, I was at my home group down in Milford, and he called me on my cell phone. We've advanced, and he said, I was just on the phone with so-and-so, and that thing happened again. Will you come home and take me to the emergency room? And I said, you bet. Left the meeting, zoomed home. Let's go. And he said, I think I just won't talk to that guy anymore. Get in the car. And he said, I promise you I'll go tomorrow. And I said, okay. So the next day, he went to our GP, who sent him right over to the cardiologist, who sent him right over to the hospital, and they did an MRI, and then they did an MRI with contrast, and we got the results immediately, and he called me at work, and everybody at work was praying. And he called me at work, and he said, I have a brain tumor. And my heart broke. And I left my desk, and my coworker, who sits right next to me, her husband had just died a year earlier from a brain tumor. I know what a brain tumor is. Look what Manta went through. And he's an older guy. And I ran down to the library to see my friend Linda, and I went into the library, and she was on her knees putting books away on the shelf. And I went, oh good, she's in the appropriate position. And I went running over to her, and she said, what's the good news? And I fell into her arms, and I started to sob. And she just held me and let me sob. And I said, he's got a brain tumor. Okay, well, we'll be praying. And everybody started praying. Everybody, everywhere. You know, Kenny went into the hospital in February for brain surgery. He came home for 2 weeks. He went back in March for a second brain surgery because they didn't get enough of it. It was big and a lot of necrotic tissue. And then it hit the fan because the surgery went okay. During the second surgery, they cut the optic nerve, and he lost the eyesight in one eye and almost total eyesight in the other. And my husband loved his job. In fact, he didn't talk to the brain surgeon about, I have to live for my family. I love my wife. And I know that he loved us. He said, I got to get back to work. I love my job. So he wanted the second surgery quick. And he was the staff training and development officer for the Pike County Correctional Facility. You don't work there without your eyesight. You don't work in a correctional facility. He was going to lose his job. And I was hysterical because he was so out of it he didn't know yet. And I know how to take care of myself. And I know in order to take care of him and anybody else, I've got to take care of this first, knowing exactly what that looked like. We were in the same hospital that the kids had been in. And that my sister still lived there. The other family members passed away or moved. And my sister said, come and stay with me and drive from here to the hospital. So it was so much more close. And I slept at her house, and she fed me breakfast, and she had a little brown bag for me to take for lunch, and she'd give me this ironing board hug, like the non-recovering family does. My husband's family was slobby drunk and full of wet kisses, and they were a lot of fun. And then there's my family that we affectionately referred to as the broomstick up the ass family. It almost hurts when you give them a hug and a kiss. But I learned to see people through God's eyes. I learned to accept them right where they were. I learned that this is the best that my sister could do, and she was doing a great job. And she was an ironing board, and her kisses were like pecks that hurt. But she loves me. And I could receive that. And I knew that I had to take care of myself. And I borrowed a GPS from one of my home group friends, and every meeting in northern New Jersey was in that GPS because I needed to go to meetings and I needed to make connections down there. And it turned out, coincidentally, that right downstairs in Summit Medical Center, there's 2 back-to-back Al-Anon meetings on Sunday mornings, and that's where I would be. And they got to know me, and they got to know the situation. When Kenny lost his eyesight, I was down there hysterical. So it wasn't you, it was you in another form, in another place, because you're all over. You're wonderful. And they have connections with AA, and they knew Kenny was in AA, and Kenny was in and out of comas, and it was a really awful thing that he was going through, and it was awful. And they wound up nicknaming him the Phoenix, because he kept rising from the ashes, but he kept going to death's door and coming back, and it was bad. And the AAs would go in there and read. They would go in there and have meetings around his bed while he was in a coma. There was one guy, Mike the Greek. I love those nicknames. You know, Bob the Blaster, Mike the Greek. And I nicknamed one recently, Resentment Roger. Because every time he shares, I'm Roger, I have a resentment. So, Mike the Greek would come and stay the most, and he was newly sober, only a few months, and he was afraid to read in front of me, so he'd ask me to leave the room, and I'd leave the room, and he'd read to my husband from the grapevine when he was in a coma. Because you're amazing, and you're beautiful, and your family. And then on Mother's Day of 2011, things really went downhill, and they told us to call in the family because Kenny wasn't going to survive. And I was absolutely hysterical and heartbroken, and our two oldest kids were able to come in. They live all over the place. The boys are in the military. Everybody has families of their own. And I remember sitting outside a Summit Medical Center and just howling in pain and agony. And my sponsor said, "Has a priest come yet?" And I said, "No, I've been calling him." And she said, "I'll get you a priest." And she called me back and she said, "Well, I don't know if a priest is coming or if we're all excommunicated." But I gave him a piece of my mind. The priest came. He was a little nervous, a little, shaky, but I don't know what she did, but he came. And she said to me, "Did you ask for a miracle?" And our literature says, be careful what you pray for, because you don't want to beg your own harms. And I didn't want to beg my own harm. I trust my higher power. And from my experience, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that I was going to be all right. I didn't know what all right looked like. But I knew that I was going to travel the gift of grief if necessary. I already started because he was blind at least. And she said, "Ask for a miracle." And I said, "We've had so many. I don't feel worthy of asking. We've got Amanda, we've got TJ, we've got recovery, both of us. Our marriage is healing. Our finances are in order. Like miracle after miracle has happened in our life. I don't feel worthy to ask for another one." And she said, "Ask for another one." So I said, "God, I'm not going to beg my own harms, and I trust you. But I would really love it if he could live and be okay. Up to you. Just letting you know." And there were 22 people. They told us not to leave the hospital. There were 22 people who stayed over that night. Me and my kids, 2 of their friends, and the rest of them were you. You stayed with us. You brought us water and yogurt and waited on us hand and foot. "What do you need? What can we do? We want a meeting. Do you want us to pray?" And what I wanted was for him to not be alone. So somebody made a schedule, and one of us was with him all the time. He was never left alone. And they told us what was going to happen. Friends, family started to come to say goodbye from all over. And they told us what was going to happen was that his heart rate would increase and his blood pressure would decrease. And it got to a point where his blood pressure was just one number. And his body was swelling. They pulled out all the stops to save his life because he had so much to live for, and he was a healthy guy before this all happened. And the next morning, we were all down in the room together, and the priest walked in, and 22 people surrounded this priest, and the priest was like, "What?" And we were like, "Well, how's Kenny?" And he said, "I don't know, I just came down to get coffee." Oh. And then the surgeon came down and he was smiling and he said, "We've nicknamed him the Phoenix. We're like this much optimistic because he made it through the night and things were like, he's not, don't leave." But we've got like this little tiny glimmer of hope. And we stayed in the hospital for 3 more days, and then they said, "You guys can go home, we've got him." But what happened as a result, and my sponsor said, you know, it doesn't matter why, it matters what are you going to do about it. So, I don't know if it was because he didn't come to a meeting for a long time, because he was in a coma, the drugs they were giving him, the brain surgery, the injury, whatever. But when Kenny came out of that, he was Kenny pre-recovery, not my Kenny. And he was mean, and he was obnoxious, and he couldn't hold his head up. They used a Hoya lift. He was in that same position in the wheelchair as our son. They had to move him. He couldn't sustain rehabilitation, so he had to go into skilled nursing. And me and the insurance company, there's all these people who cook up these schemes with me. And we cook up the scheme to put him in the nursing home for a few months so that he would get strong enough so he could withstand rehab. And that's what we did. But when he went to rehab, the rehab was wonderful, but social worker, that name is kind of a misnomer. Don't get fooled by that, because their job is to get him out of there and make money for the diagnosis code, and they sent him home too soon. And it was the one decision I made out of fear. And he came home, and I looked like an unmade bed, and I was still working. I still work full time. But, it was difficult, and my knees were buckling. And when my knees buckled, there was that one set of footprints in the sand. Because today, when you guys say to me, jump in my arms, I'm like, and the one set of footprints is you carrying me. And we trudged through that together too. And there was a schedule to come and stay with Kenny and make meals. And he had a potty chair and a shower chair and a wheelchair. And there was an AA event around the corner at Resentment Rogers' house. And you guys came over and took him over in the wheelchair and fed him hot dogs and made him happy for a little while and brought him back. And it was rough, but we did it together, because that's what we do. We don't have to face anything alone anymore. So little by slowly, Kenny's getting better and better and better. That was 2011. It's 2019 now. He's home, and I'm here. Resentment Roger is watching him. They ran out of gas this morning, and they called me in Tennessee. We were on our way to a meeting, and we're really cranky. Do you have something spiritual to say? Nope. Good luck. Click. Just, I suggested that Kenny push Roger out into traffic. That was about it. Life is lifey. And I think to myself, we've been through enough. God, it's not fair for anything else to happen, but that's just not true. And I don't think that God is some malevolent Greek thing that orchestrates all this. I think that things happen as a result of choices as a society, choices as individuals. Genetic things happen. My job is to walk in cooperation with my health and be an inspiration. My husband has this gigantic cookie belly. He's on 25 different medicines that sustain his life. He's a walking miracle. He doesn't manage things the way I want him to. He doesn't work his program the way I think he should. I have no opinion. I keep my mouth shut, because shut up is still a good slogan for me today. And then when I have an issue with that, I call my sponsor, and she changes my channel, and my focus becomes here, where I do have power today. I still adore him. I'm so lucky to have him today. I'm lucky to have my life today. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago about why we still keep coming to recovery. And the bottom line is, I don't want my misery refunded. I can't imagine walking the walk that I have to walk without you. I adore you. You are my people. I'm staying. And thank you so much for letting me share.